Hello, I'm James and this is Maths Kitchen, and in today's video I'm going to be looking at fractions, decimals and percentages, and I'm going to be showing you all the skills that you'll need to work with those in your Maths GCSE. Now before I get into it, just a reminder that there are practice questions on everything that I cover in this video over at my website mathskitchen.com, and I've put a link to that in the description below. I've also put a link in the description below to the particular questions that I've worked through in this video, so you don't necessarily have to watch the whole thing if there's just one particular thing that you need help on. Right, that said, let's have a look at the first question. What is 2/5 as a decimal? And we're allowed to use a calculator for this. So when you're allowed to use a calculator, these are really easy questions. You just need to understand that we can interpret that 2/5 as 2 divided by 5. So on your calculator, just 2 divided by 5, your calculator will work that out for you, and that gives you 0.4. Okay, so as a decimal, 2/5 is 0.4. What is 1/8 as a decimal? And this is a non-calculator question. So there's two different ways we can do this, but we need to understand that that 1/8 can be interpreted as 1 divided by 8. So one way we could do this is to use some short division to work out what 1 divided by 8 is. So we're going to be dividing by 8 and we're going to be dividing 1. Well, we know this is going to go into decimals. So I'm going to put 1.0000 in anticipation of going into some decimals there. And I'll put the decimal point above my line as well. So you may have been taught to set this out slightly differently, but it will still be using essentially the same technique, even if you are setting it out slightly differently. So how many 8s go into 1? Well, we can't fit any 8s into 1. So we carry that 1 over. How many 8s fit into 10? It's 1. And there would be 2 left over. Carry that over to there. How many 8s go into 20? Well, it's 2. And there would be 4 left over. Carry that over. How many 8s go into 40? That would be 5. And exactly 5, so we've finished. So 1/8 as a decimal is 0.125. Another way that you could have done this, it just depends which you prefer, but if you are happy with the idea that half is 0.5 and a quarter is half of that, so half of 0.5, which is 0.25, and 1/8 is half of a quarter each time you're dividing by 2. So half of 0.25 is 0.125. And to do that half of 0.25, I sort of think of it as just half of, what's half of 25? Well, half of 25 is 12.5. So that's where the 125 comes from. Okay, whichever way you did it, the answer is 0.125. What is 11/20 as a percentage? And this is a non-calculator one. So as is so often the case, there are different ways you can do this. If you've got a number on the bottom, if your denominator, in other words, if you can see that that easily multiplies up to 100, in other words, if you can change this into an equivalent fraction that has 100 as a denominator, and in this case we just multiply by 5. We'll do the same to the numerator, we'll multiply that by 5 as well. That gives us 55 over 100. So 11/20 is equal to 55 over 100, 55 hundredths. And percentage is just all about, out of 100. And that's what we've got there. We've got 55 out of 100. Therefore, it's 55%. Okay, so you're aiming to get your denominator to be 100. So 55%. What about, I just want to show you an additional example here. I'll do it in the bottom corner here. What about if you had something like 27/30? Well, there's no easy way to multiply 30 up to 100, or at least you can't do it using a whole number anyway. But what you could do, this fraction simplifies down. 27/30 we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 3. That gives us 9/10. And now we've got ourselves to something that can easily be multiplied up so that you have a denominator of 100. If we multiply the numerator and the denominator both by 10, 10 by 10 is 100, 9 times 10 is 90, so we get 90 hundredths, which is the same as 90%. Okay, so sometimes you will need to simplify that fraction down. What is 7/8 as a percentage? And we're allowed to use a calculator for this one. So to convert to a decimal, we just interpret that fraction as division, 7 divided by 8. We can do that on our calculator. 7 divided by 8, which is 0.875. Now, so the only other thing you need to know is how do you convert from a decimal to a percentage? All you have to do is multiply by 100. So 0.875 times 100 is 87.5. So 7/8 then is equal to 87.5%. Okay, 2 steps. First of all, you do the division, then you multiply by 100 to change that from a decimal to a percentage. Right, 0.12 as a percentage. Well, so to convert from a decimal to a percentage, all you've got to do is multiply by 100. So 0.12 times 100 is equal to 12. Therefore, 0.12 is 12%. That's it. Really straightforward. Right, 17% as a decimal. Well, to convert from a decimal to a percentage, you multiply by 100. So to convert from a percentage to a decimal, you do the opposite. You divide by 100. Okay, so all we've got to do is 17 divided by 100. Okay, and that gives us 0.17. So 17% is equal to 0.17. Okay, that dividing by 100, if you just think about your hundreds, tens, and units columns, or ones columns if you prefer. We started with 17. To divide by 100, all you do is move each number across 2 places to the right. So that 7 ends up moving 2 places to the right. That ends up being there. The 1 moves 2 places to the right. That ends up being here. So the decimal point obviously stays there. So we get that's where the 0.17 comes from. Right, 42% as a fraction. Well, 42%, percent means out of 100. So any percentage can be written, or any percentage that's a whole number can just be written as a fraction out of 100. So 42% is just 42 out of 100, over 100, or 42 hundredths. Okay, all those things mean the same, don't they? Different ways of interpreting the same thing. Now you can simplify that. In an exam situation, if it doesn't ask you to simplify, I wouldn't bother. I would just leave it like that. But if you want to simplify, generally speaking, it's good practice to simplify. Both of those numbers can be divided by 2. So we get 21 over 50. And I don't think both of those numbers can be divided by anything else. So they can't both be divided by the same thing. So that tells us that is as simplified as we can make it. 21/50. Right, 0.68 as a fraction. Well, 0.68 as a percentage is 68% because we just multiply by 100 to convert that to a percentage. 0.68 is equal to 68%. To convert a percentage that's a whole number, like this one, 68%, to convert that to a fraction, you can just write it with 100 as your denominator because percent just means out of 100. So 68% just means 68 out of 100, or 68 hundredths if you prefer. That's it, really simple. Put these numbers in ascending order: 1/3, 3/10, 0.303, and 33%. Well, ascending means going up in an increasing value, okay? And actually, if you're doing this on the Maths Kitchen website, what we want you to do is to start with the smallest one and then to have them going up. But you actually start with the smallest one at the top, okay? And then they go up as you work down the page. So the way to do these is to convert them all, either all to decimals or all percentages is the easiest way. You could convert them all to a fraction with the same denominator, but that is not going to be the easiest way to do this. So I'm going to convert these all to decimals. Now this is a calculator paper, so I can just use a calculator, although actually I know these ones because I'm familiar with these. I've seen them lots of times. So I know that 1/3 is equal to 0.3 recurring, 0.33333 forever, okay? So 1/3 is equal to 0.3 recurring. I know that 1/10 is equal to 0.1, 2/10 is equal to 0.2, and so 3/10 is equal to 0.3. The next one is already a decimal, 0.303, and then 33%, I'll put that over here, that is equal to 0.33. To convert from a percentage to a decimal, you just divide by 100. If you had awkward fractions that you didn't know, and you can use a calculator, then you can work them out just by doing the division. 3 divided by 10 or 1 divided by 3. You could do that on your calculator. You'll get the answers that I've got here. Now we need to convert, or now we need to put all of these in order. So you can see that they've all got 3 in the tenths column. Then we will look to the hundredths column. We are asked to put these in ascending order. So we're looking for the smallest. So 0.3, that doesn't have anything in the hundredths column or the thousandths column or anything beyond that tenths column. So all that's got is 3/10. So that is going to be the smallest. I'm just going to put them in order from left to right here. The next smallest will be 0.303 because that's got 3/10 and then it doesn't have any hundredths, but it does have some thousandths, but thousands are pretty small. So 0.303, that'll be the next biggest. And then 33%, which is 0.33, is next. Is very, very similar to a third, but a third has 0.33, but then it keeps going. It's got some thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, and so on. So it's ever so slightly bigger. So 0.3 recurring. Now, when you do this in an exam, it's really important that you don't write this down as your answer. It's really important that you write down the values that you were given in the question. So 0.3, that was 3/10, wasn't it? So that is the smallest. You've got to put the ones that you were given in the question. And then the 0.303, well, that is how we were given it in the question. 0.33, that was 33%, so we've got to convert it back to the 33%. And then the 0.3 recurring, that was the 1/3. Okay, people often make this mistake, or they'll convert it to decimals, and then they'll put those as their answer. But this is what you must put as your answer. So that's an outline of all the things you will need to be able to work with fractions, decimals and percentages in your GCSE. So if you found the video useful, it's really helpful if you can give it a little like or subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, or even just check out some of the other videos. Why not have a look at my series on 20 ways to succeed in your maths GCSE? Right, thank you very much for watching and joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in another video.